Good afternoon and welcome to the session, Using New Technology to Engage 21st Century Students in Developing Literacy Skills. I'm Ken Whittick and I'm a consultant here at the board office. What I really want to get at is we need to change how we teach literacy to students. 21st century students are engaged and embedded and using technology, and if we want them to engage in literacy skills and really work on those skills, we need to go after them. So just a minds on, here's something to think about. An entry event is a teaching strategy teachers use to get students turned on to a topic that they're going to introduce. And so my entry event is something about human civilization. 5MA, that's 5 million years ago, they say humans split from chimpanzees. So let's say the human race is 5 million years old. We didn't begin writing till about 3200 BC. That means we've only been reading and writing for 0.1% of our entire history. No wonder we have to learn literacy. We have to learn how to read and write because students, it's not part of our evolutionary history. It's not ingrained in us. It hasn't been part of our development yet. So let's set our agenda. I want to set 3 learning goals for us, so I'm going to introduce those, and then I want to build some community. We have about 30 people here today, so I want to build some community among us. And then divide my presentation into 3 parts, kind of a minds-on, which is the impetus for changing literacy instruction, why we need to change how we approach literacy in the classroom. Then the action, I want to talk about the tools for 21st century students and what they're using and how they're using them. And finally, I want to talk about consolidation. For my consolidation part of my project, I want to talk about connecting the tools and skills and making it work. So, to begin, 3 learning goals. Whenever I bring teachers together to work, I want to build community. And that's one of our goals today. I want to build a community of professionals interested in improving literacy skills of their students. We come together to learn, we come together to share, and that's key in moving our system forward. A great teacher working alone in the classroom does a great job with those 25, 30 students, but those 25, 30 students are the only ones that benefit. If we can bring teachers together who start sharing best practice, who form networks, who form communications, and begin talking to each other and sharing their best practices, then we as a whole system, as a whole province move together, and that's key. Second learning goal, I want to calibrate our thinking regarding literacy and the potential of new technology. I mean, just bring in alignment. I mean, everyone's using technology, everyone teaches literacy, but by coming together and sharing a message, then we're just sort of seeing if we're all on the same page. And there'll be time to talk today to discuss the issues that I'm presenting. And my third goal, I want to further develop our repertoire of teaching strategies. You're all great teachers. We're all great teachers. Bringing us together isn't about saying we need to improve. It's about, refining our things. A lot of good teachers arrive at good teaching practices through trial and error. And it's nice to find out that there's a name for some of those things you're doing. You may have been doing DI for years and then find out it's called differentiated instruction. Well, if then there's a name about that is applied to it, you can now use that in your communication with other teachers and again, further move us ahead if we're all talking the same language. So those are our 3 goals. Develop a network, further develop our strategies, and calibrate our thinking. So let's start with community building. If we're going to build a community, let's get to know each other. When we meet people, we need to build connections with them. I meet people all the time, and I'm always finding about their background, their job history, where they come from. See if we have some previous connections and get to know them. It helps you remember people. So communities are built on building connections. We're going to do that by sharing a top 3 list. We see top 10 lists everywhere. David Letterman does top 10 lists. End of the year, you get your top movies, your top books, your top sales of the week, things like that. So the introduction of yourself will include your top 3 lists and your top 3 best remembered texts. And you can use any text you've read. They could be books, magazines, websites, newspapers, etc. I'm going to pause and I'm going to give you 2 minutes just to think individually what would be on your top 3 best remembered texts. Okay, now I want you to turn to a partner and share. Share with your partner your name, your school and assignment, and your top 3 list. And this is a teaching strategy called Think, Pair, Share. I had you thinking, and now I want you to share. And by sharing, you get to test out your ideas and your thinking before you're asked to bring it to a whole room. So it's a safe environment for students and for people to share their thinking. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes, find a partner, introduce yourselves, and then share your top 3 list. Okay, Now, we haven't got time for everyone's top 3 list today. So we're going to go around the room and everyone's going to take a turn. I want your name, your school and assignment, and just one of your top 3 best remembered texts to share with the rest of us. And as you listen to everyone's top 3 lists, and you might be able to make a connection with that person or say, hey, I've got something in common. And that's how we're building connections and building community. So that's share. So let's go around the room and share. Okay, good job. Let's get going. Mine's on. I want to use 4 corners to get you thinking about our topic of literacy. If I've got 4 quotes, one in each corner of the room, I want you to move to the corner of the room that represents an idea you agree with the most. So in this corner over here on my left, we have literacy skills are relevant in the digital age. If that's something that resonates with you, that would be the corner you would go to. In the far left corner, number 2 is literacy is best taught in elementary school. Secondary school is for teaching ideas. In the far right corner, number 3 is literacy skills are more important than ever in our digital society. And in my corner immediately on my right here, number 4, literacy is a lifelong skill that continually needs to be practiced and refined. So I want you to go to the corner that resonates most with you, meet with the people in your corner, and develop an argument to persuade others to join you. So I'm going to give you 4 minutes to move, meet, develop an argument. Then each group will have time to present their argument and try and persuade people to move from their corner to your corner. And this teaching strategy is called 4 corners, and it's really good at allowing students a chance to move about the room. It's good for teachers. It's kind of like a snapshot. You get a quick sense of where everyone's thinking is by where all the bodies are, what people agree with, what they disagree with. Teachers can use this strategy, before a unit, by asking students about their depth of knowledge about a topic, and having them move to, I'm very comfortable with this topic, I don't know anything. It's great for formative assessment. Anyway, 4 minutes, so move, meet, and develop an argument. That went really well. Okay, so everyone's going to go back to their seats, and we'll start talking about the impetus for change. Why do we need to change? So let's bring back that idea. We need to learn about literacy. As humans, we need to learn how to read and write. It doesn't come as naturally to us as walking, as eating, as breathing, as something we've been doing for 5 million years. So we as teachers need to be on the forefront. We need to lead that because it's such an important skill. Look at this quote. Students are saying everything we need to know is on the web. Why do we need an education? You hear that now, right? I can Google all the information I need. I don't need a teacher. The teachers are asking students know how to operate a computer. Do they know how to use it, right? When they Google something and get all those pages of results, do they know how to sift through it and sort it and find the best material? Do they know how to ask the correct questions? So this kind of sets up a kind of generational thing of old school and digital natives. Digital natives being a term Mark Prensky uses. Talks about students that have never known anything but the internet or anything but the digital age. My generation, we grew up before there were computers. So we are digital immigrants in that we immigrated into a digital age. It came, when I was in high school. When I got married, we bought our first computer. But my son, he's 13 years old. Google's 13 years old. He's not known a world without Google. So the old school is they prefer black on white text. I love holding an old-fashioned book. Digital natives, they prefer text with a variety of colors. Old school, me, I prefer slow, linear sources of information. Bring it to me one at a time. The digital natives prefer multiple sources. Their brains want faster learning. The click, click, click world. Old versus new. The old books had to be complemented by pictures. We had text and we had pictures that complemented them. New sources, they have pictures. Their world's filled with pictures. They have text, which then support the pictures. So there's a change in how we think and how we look at things. And look at this. We process pictures 60,000 times faster than we do text. Because I can look at a picture of a cow and translate that. When I look at the C, the O, the W, I have to take down each letter. Then I have to put the letters together. And I have to create the sound. I have to create the word. And I have to make the image that goes with the word and make the connection to cow. So images work so much faster. So we got a generation now that's learning at different speeds. And images are strong, they're powerful. We remember pictures longer than we do regular text, though pictures themselves are a text. For digital learners, those images are powerful teaching tools. We can use those to our advantage. We can teach skills like making connections, inferencing, main ideas, using pictures if we wish. Old versus new. We used to learn information in case we would need it. We didn't always have access to information. When I was learning topics in school, if I really liked what the teacher was talking about, what could I do when I got home? I could dig out an old set of encyclopedias that were out of date and probably had an American bias because I was living in Canada. And I could maybe go to the town library if it was open and if it had a book on that topic. Now, students, they learn if they need it. There's so much out there at their fingertips. They can't learn everything in case they need it. So it's at their fingertips. They learn it if they need it. If I need it, I'm going to learn it today. If I don't need it, I don't want to learn it. Digital natives need skills to use often. They don't need the knowledge. They need the skills. When I want to learn this, what skills do I have to get act that knowledge? Like I said, they don't need facts. Google has them. Our job is to teach how to ask questions, evaluate answers, think critically. Students need to be literate to do this. And that's why literacy is still important. It is vital for this society. Even though they're working in images, there is a literacy to reading images. And all the skills we talk about, making connections, visualizing, previewing text, metacognition as you read, those skills are still important in this society. Here's the question that prompt me to really reflect on my teaching. What year are you preparing your students for? 1973, 1975? What year are your students planning on graduating? Are you preparing them for that year, or are you even preparing them for today? Right? We need to think about the future, not the past. Just because I learned it really well in 1970s doesn't mean that's applying for the students now. We have to prepare them for a future world, not a past world. The world no longer uses tin cans to talk. The world changed. Education has to change. How I learned when I was in school, in high school, and university is not how the world works now. I can't use that, well, it worked for me, argument when I'm teaching. Our brains grow according to how we use them. Exposure to digital media is changing the brains of digital natives. I've read an example once of they analyzed the brains of taxi drivers in London, England. And the portion of their brain that controls directions and spaces and finding their way around is physically altered and looks different than people who are not taxi drivers. And so what does that suggest to us? Well, it suggests that their brains continued to grow, even as adult taxi drivers. Their brains grew as they used that part of the brain more. So the brains are not static organs in our body. There's something that continually evolve and grow as we use it. So we don't give up on students that have a weakness. We have to just access that and work with those students to get them thinking. And since digital natives' brains are looking at things, the world differently, instead of looking at text all the time, they're looking at images, then they're learning differently. And we need to change the way we teach. So here's a question for you. Teachers continue to do the same things without changing. Who really has a learning problem? I'm going to give you 5 minutes for a think, pair, share. I want you to think about that for yourself for a minute. Then find a partner, share your thinking. A think, pair, share is a great environment for getting students to think. So I want you to think about your ideas, and then we're going to move into the pairs are going to join in with other groups and have a group discussion. So in the next 5 minutes, and I'll give you times for doing the changes. And so what idea have I said so far is resonating with you? What's going through your brain right now? So let's pause for a think, pair, share. Okay, thank you for that. Let's move. So we've talked about the change in society. Now let's look about the change in education. The old mission for education was about providing access for all people to basic education and access to a relatively small group to go to university, right? We wanted the factory model. We wanted to train people to be workers in the factory, be organized, show up to work on time, do your job, go home. Those that showed aptitude for it went on to university and for different jobs. We sifted and sorted, and Damian Cooper put it on a graph like this. The low end of the graph represents 0, and it was one size fits all. We gave them some information, we tested, and we got a random sample. One size fits all. And it's kind of like the Tour de France, right? You have one winner At the one end, you have one loser, and you have a big group of cyclists in the middle. And there's no camaraderie. There's kind of competitive. We use the old bell curve, and we'd move the bell curve if the test was too hard, if the marks were too easy, too low. It would change, and students had trouble keeping up. That's the old model. Look at this quote. Even students who enter the workplace right after high school need advanced literacy skills. Our system can't afford to have students dropping out. We can't sift and sort anymore and say, oh, well, those students aren't doing so well, they can drop out and join the workforce. We have Learning to 18 because we need those students to be literate. We need them to be functioning members of society. It costs too much as taxpayers to carry someone who's not working. The new mission, then, is to get all students to meet high standards of education and make them lifelong learners. We have to teach them how to be continually learning because we're preparing them for jobs that don't yet exist. There are so many jobs in this world now that are available to do that didn't exist when I was in high school. And we're preparing students to go into the future that's rapidly changing. They might be going into jobs that don't exist either yet, but will be there in the future. They have to learn how to adapt and be ready for that workforce. So this is the new graph Damien Cooper created. And the left-hand side, the low end, that represents 50%. Our job is to move students up. We want everyone to pass. He compared it to like doing a Niagara bike tour. Everyone goes out on a tour. The tour director will change courses, will accommodate every kind of rider that's with them. The strong riders can ride ahead. We'll support the weak riders. If there's a big hill that the weak riders can't handle, we allow them to get off and push their bike up the hill. We accommodate. We're supporting. And it's getting excellence from all. We're not saying we're going to pass you just to give you a bump, but we're demanding that you work hard. And this graph is no longer a random graph now. It's not a random sample. It's a graph that represents us coming in and doing interventions, small group instructions, one-on-one teaching, so that we're moving those students from the bottom up. And so everyone's moving ahead. The new mission requires substantial changes in daily instructional practice. We have to change as teachers. This comes from Full in the book Breakthrough. So that's the call. That's our call to get out there and do something. Helen Cravola said, all students can achieve at high standards given significant time and support. Some students need more time, some students need more support. Our job as teachers is to identify who needs that and step in and help them. And we can all teach these high standards. We just have to be given right conditions and assistance to help students. We want to put students in control of their learning, right? Rather than the teachers being in control and students following, if we give students control and we follow them, then we're going to get more engagement. In the end, we want to put the students in control of what they're doing. A massive amount of research shows that effective learning requires adequate time spent directly engaged in learning. Learning takes time. Students need time to learn. So we have to be precise in our instruction. Next quote says that. Without focus, instruction is inefficient. Students spend too much time completing tasks that are too easy and do not involve new learning, or too little time on tasks that are too difficult and involved, and too much new learning or relearning occurs. So we have to be very precise in order to help our students. If we're trying to get excellence from all of them, we have to gather the data to give them targeted instruction. We're the more knowing other. We're the teacher. We have to structure the learning so that the difficulty of the task is in alignment with the individual needs of our learner. We can't ask a student to go from 0 to 100. We have to find out where the student's starting point is and set reasonable goals with them in discussions. Classroom instruction should be organized so that teaching follows the student as opposed to the students following the teacher. Okay, so let's do another think, pair, share. What does this look like in your classroom for your subject area? If the teaching's following the students as opposed to the students following the teacher, how will that look if we transfer our thinking? So think for yourself for a minute, then I'll call for you to share with a pair, and then the pairs are going to partner up into groups and we'll discuss this. Okay, great discussion, folks. I got a chance to visit some of the groups and hear what they were saying. So now, let's start looking at these tools and what are they doing for our students. In our pre-internet world, remember the old generation, we listened to music that the DJs or VJs picked for us. If my favorite song was out on radio, I had to wait for it, radio DJ, to play it for me to hear it. If I wanted to hear it again, well, I was either stuck with getting to town and finding a place to buy the song, or waiting till it came next into rotation on the radio. And we watched what TV stations were provided for us. I only had 2 channels. If it wasn't shown on one of the channels I got, I didn't see it. And if I didn't see it when it was offered at 9 o'clock on Thursday night, then I missed it. We read news from the angle of the local editor, right? My local newspaper was written by that editor, and I had his point of view. We tolerated not having a choice. That was our world. We liked choice. As soon as VCRs came in, people started buying them. Cassettes, I remember getting a cassette player so I could record songs, so I could play it over and over again. Cable TV, people gravitated towards that because they had more stations. But our internet world, the world we live in now, we listen to the music we want. iTunes allows us to pick our songs one at a time and program our devices so we create our own personal playlists. We watch what we want. We're not stuck watching one channel or 2 channels. We have YouTube. We can create our own selection of favorite videos. We can record and see any show we want at any time. And we read news on the internet. We follow blogs and tweets from different perspectives. I'm not stuck reading from one news commentator's position. I can record, I can seek out and find out what other people are thinking. So in this world, we expect choice. Our students expect choice. We like it. We ourselves like it as adults. It's not unfair. It's not an exception for students to expect the same. They want choice. And that's what's going to engage them. That's where we have to go. Digital technology is all about improving communication. We can research further with the internet, right? And more thoroughly. With the internet now, I'm not stuck using that encyclopedia set that my parents had from the 1940s. I can get up-to-date information. And you heard lots of stories of Wikipedia, how thoroughly and quickly it is updated by the users. And we can research more thoroughly. I don't have to just read text, but I can find images, audio, video. There's a tornado last night in the mid-plains of the United States. I can go on YouTube and find images of that tornado right away. We can share larger with the world, right? When I create something, I'm not creating for the teacher. I'm not creating for my mom or dad. I'm now sharing with the world. And I'm sharing more thoroughly. I'm not sharing text, but I can share audio and video and images, anything I want. And so there's a world out there that I can share with, and I can read from that world, and I can also create for that world. Students use the technology to communicate farther and more thoroughly, and the world is their library. It's their text. In the world, they find the material they need to read, listen, watch, and they find the people that will help them with anything they want. And so with how can a teacher who only wants to teach from a textbook, one page at a time, compete with the world like that? You can't. And that's not preparing students for the future. Learners who lack input into decision making feel powerless and unmotivated. This is true for adults, for teachers, and for our students. It comes from Camborne. And that's why we need to change how we teach literacy. Right? We need to go where they're going, go where their texts are, give them choices so they're motivated. If we want them to practice, we need to motivate them to practice, because good reading doesn't occur unless you practice. Personalization requires precision, and precision demands ongoing learning, right? If students want to personalize their learning, we have to teach them how to sift and sort through all those millions of hits they get from a Google search and find exactly what they need. That's where we come in as the expert, the skills experts. In Breakthrough, Fullen and Hill and Cravola say, for us, the core problem is the failure to establish classroom routines and practice that represent personalized, ongoing, data-driven, focused instruction. We have to learn. Teaching is not an easy task. It's a hard career. We have to learn constantly in this position. And we have to learn how to teach to students that want a personalized education. I'll give you a moment to read this quote. So can we change our culture of teaching? Yes, that's why we're here. There's ways, there's research, there's data to support us. We need to change, and we're doing that now. In the 21st century, education is about project-based learning. It's about connection with peers around the world, service learning, independent research, design and creativity, and more than anything else, critical thinking and challenges to old assumptions. Literacy is right in there with all that, right? Literacy is the core to being the one that's connecting with people, to learning, to research, to design, to creativity. Literacy is right there among it. So digital technology is changing how we do things, including how we access knowledge and share our thinking. Students are engaging because they crave authentic audiences. The world's engaging because we crave authentic audiences. How many million people around the world are on Facebook or on Twitter or on Flickr or on YouTube? Why? Because it gives them an authentic audience. We crave authentic audiences. And what's this mean? It means I could sit at home and write in my journal every day what I do and my thoughts and my feelings around the world and hide my little diary. How many people do you think the millions of people do that? No. But they're putting their lives out there on Facebook, Twitter, Flickr, YouTube. They're sharing pictures, videos, thoughts, links, ideas. Why are they doing that? Because we crave communication. We're a social animal. Ever since our early development, we've been social animals living in communities and communicating with people. And even before the internet, we used to hang out as teens downtown with the other kids, talking to them. Now teens can hang out without leaving their bedroom. We, as adults, we get together, we share small talk, we build those connections that we talked about and we did for our community building. It's all about sharing, connecting with others. So we crave authentic audiences. That's how a motivating force for students. And if we can tap into that, we can tap into getting them to learn and use literacy and then deliver the skills they need to them. Students have a variety of tools available for them, for publishing, for reading, for communicating, for sharing. These new texts students want to engage with. We need to use these texts to access literacy skills. When you think about Facebook, you can put pictures, videos, and information on there. And if you look at Twitter, you look at the really successful Twitter users, they're good at delivering their message. So we need to have students testing their literacy skills. That's what it was all about in the old days when we had students write personal letters and essays and do paragraph writing in class for the teacher. It was about practicing their literacy skills. Well, they're out there practicing, and if we can guide that practice, if we can encourage that practice, if we can give some structure to that practice, then they're going to become better at using literacy. So let's start connecting. We've got these tools. We've got these rich tools that are driving them into the future and are motivating to use it. They use it whether they have the skills or not, but they stumble around. So with teachers' guidance, they can use them successfully. The big challenge in high school readings is to read about what you don't know a lot about and learn while reading it. That's the old school thinking, right? Students would come to us, we'd assume they know how to read. They weren't reading they weren't learning to read anymore. We were expecting them to read to learn. They are supposed to do the reading and learn. But teens are often skilled enough at reading what's familiar and immediately engaging to them. The demands required for comprehending high school biology, chemistry, and math, that's so much greater. That's why we have to continually teach literacy. You can say, oh, they're arriving from grade 8, they have to have some literacy skills. Sure, they have literacy skills for grade 8, but now you're putting them into grade 9, you're putting them in grade 10, you're putting them into specialized subjects like the quote says, biology, chemistry, and math. That's new literacy, and that's why we can't stop teaching literacy, and students can't stop practicing. This type of reading requires students to understand higher theoretical concepts about subjects which they aren't familiar with. And Catherine Snow, she compares it to learning how to overhaul an engine by reading a manual before having any familiarity with what's underneath the hood. You've never looked at an engine before and you're supposed to learn how to fix it by looking at a manual? No, we have to be their guide and help them understand these concepts. So our job's not disappearing. Our job's even more important nowadays. Students could read academic texts or challenging literary works by themselves. They wouldn't need teachers. But of course, most cannot gain the full benefit from and enjoy difficult books when they read such books on their own. Those academics, challenging texts, those harder literary works, they need some guidance to work through those. So, and this is Kelly Gallagher, another source, saying, our role as teachers is just as important. Here's the big problem though. Many middle and high school teachers have not been trained in the current theories of content literacy. Right? If we don't get support as teachers, it's going to be really hard for us to support students. I went through Teachers College to train to be a high school English teacher. And we did not, in our time there, discuss how to teach reading comprehension. We learned how to organize a unit for Shakespeare, how to organize a writing folder, but we never really got into the nitty-gritty of teaching literacy. So if I wasn't trained as an English teacher, what can I expect a math, science, geography teacher to have in the way of skills for teaching literacy? It's not there. It seems funny that we train for 4 years at least probably to be content specialists. I'm an expert in geography, expert in math, expert in science. Only 1 year to be an expert in teaching. Teaching's a profession that needs more support. You don't come out of Teachers College a great teacher, and lots of time and effort is spent learning how to be a good teacher and attending PD sessions and sharing our best practice is just ways to learn and become better. So we probably agree with this. To become good readers, students must read and read and read. The more students read, the better they become. So, and we see that. Students who read for fun have higher reading scores than students who rarely read. The more you read, you can become the expert. Kind of like Malcolm, I forget his name, Malcolm, who said in the Outliers that 10,000 hours to become an expert at anything. Students who have read for 10,000 hours are probably expert readers. It's only by going through volumes and volumes of reading that many students internalize the comprehension skills and gain the experience they need to acquire academic success. That practice reading, then they can tackle those hard texts. But our students haven't got that kind of practice. They haven't been reading that long. And we see this. We agree with this probably. Unfortunately, in many schools, the poorest readers read the least, often as much as 3 times less than their peers. How much of a setback is that for a student if they're reading less than their peers? You can't learn much from books you can't read. Teachers need to use their diagnostic resources, the OCA, the LIT test, find out who your weak students are and offer them targeted interventions. Sometimes we have those also middle-of-the-road students, what we call dormant readers. They possess the reading skills needed for academic tasks, but they see reading as a school job, not as an activity in which they would willingly engage in outside of school. We need to change that thinking also, because if they're going to become better readers, if they're going to tackle new tasks, if they become lifelong learners, we need them to always be reading. And we need them to see reading as something that they want to do and enjoy doing. Now, teachers, because we're secondary and we think, oh, they come here reading to us, we assign a book. Read this book and get the information for it. It's too much. But when Kelly Gallagher says too much assigning goes on and not enough teaching, students are on the road to read aside. They'll stop reading. So first, we must teach comprehension, just not assess it. Old school way was to read this book, and if you can write an essay, then I'm assuming you got reading skills. Well, no, we have to teach them how to read, not assess their reading, but assess their skills. Studies of effective secondary school reading programs demonstrate one thing. We cannot significantly improve the literacy skills of the adolescents without working with the staff. We've agreed that the staff aren't very well trained in Teachers College. We need to come up with approaches to help staff. And we're starting here today with our group, or with our network. We're going to share our reading skills and strategies that we use. I'll give you a moment to read this quote. Right? We need to help students find the books, the texts that will work for them. We should be guiding students in real-world reading. Kelly Gallagher is leading the charge here, assigning critical reading of magazines, newspapers, websites, and blogs that provide background knowledge. So he says, get out of the classroom with your text, get into the real world, get into this digital age. Students are twittering, there's text. We can read those texts, we can learn how to make inferences and connections using those. We can use blogs, we can use Facebook, we can use Flickr, we can use YouTube, we can use all these resources as our textbooks, and we can go where the students are and get them practicing. If we want students to read and practice reading, then let's give them texts that they think are not school texts. It's okay to read outside of school. Our job as teachers, then, is to put the thinking skills of a proficient reader into the non-proficient reader's thought processes. We need to explicitly revisit the skill of reading and show students how to think while reading. Right? So we want to improve their skills. We have to show them how readers work, how readers think. It's a very very boring thing to watch. Someone sitting there reading, you don't see anything happening, but there's tons of things going on in your head, right? You're previewing the text, you're setting your purpose, you're determining what you're reading for, you're making inferences, you're visualizing, you're monitoring your reading, you're deciding whether you need to read something faster or slower. You do all these quick, almost routine thinking processes if you're a proficient reader, and that's what non-proficient readers not doing. So we need to demonstrate for that. We have to slow down our reading. The challenge for us as teachers is that we're proficient readers, right? We're university graduates. We're expert readers. In our subject area, we don't understand how hard it is for the weak readers. I can read Shakespeare. I can read a poem. I'm an English teacher. I'm a math teacher. I can read this math text. How come you can't? Right? It's a challenge for us to step back and become that non-proficient reader and see the world through their eyes. But the expert panel on students at risk in Ontario said in 2003, the content area teachers can do the best job of teaching the reading and writing skills required by their discipline. So I'm the expert in my subject area at reading, but I'm also the expert at teaching reading because I know the material well enough that I can help students through it. If we want to help students become better readers, we have to think aloud about our own comprehension processes and give students the tools they can use in new reading situations. This sounds a lot like graduate release teaching. Let's start moving towards that. We want to help students become better readers, we have to think aloud. So, Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. On the left-hand side, you have a zone of actual development. That's the level the students are at right now. So you do a diagnostic at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of a unit, you find out what their skill level is, or if we're talking about reading, what their reading level is. Then you have to decide how you're going to move them up, and you have to pick a target of a new reading level. So my students can read an 18th century text, maybe Jonathan Swift. I test them, they're not so good at reading Shakespeare, so they're having struggles. So I want to move them up to like they can read and to comprehend Shakespeare. Well, I have to move them through a zone of proximal development. And that involves a read aloud, a think aloud, where the teacher actually reads the text and pauses while reading to think aloud about what they're reading, to demonstrate to the students how it's going and what kind of thinking processes are involved in reading a Shakespearean text. Then I allow them opportunities to do a shared reading with me and a guide reading with me and independent reading. And hopefully by the end of that, the students are now operating on their own. Let's look at that more closely. So, based on Vygotsky's theory, when planning instructions, teachers need to determine what each student already knows, and from that assessment, determine what students need to learn next. It involves breaking the knowledge and the skills into small steps, modeling those steps, providing support as students learn the steps, and then gradually shifting responsibility to the student to apply the knowledge and the skills independently. Jeff Wilhelm put it another way. He said step number 1 is modeling the strategy. That's where the teacher does it, right? If I'm talking about reading, I'm going to do the reading, and I'm going to stop and think aloud saying, oh, I can make a connection here maybe to another text I read, or I can infer something from what this was just said. And the students are watching, they're listening to me. If it was a writing assignment, if we wanted to teach writing as literacy, then I would model how to write a descriptive paragraph. I'd be up on the blackboard writing away and crossing words out and putting in new words, and I'm thinking aloud. I'm showing them how messy writing is and how hard it is to do. And I'm showing them all the processes I used. Step 2 is the apprenticeship of use. And that's what the teacher does. I do it again, but the students are going to help me now. So if I'm reading and I'm saying, oh, I can make a text-to-world connection here. Who in the class could help me make a text-to-world connection? Now I'm inviting them into my conversation. I'm inviting them in, and they're trying out the process of making connections. Or if I'm writing a descriptive paragraph, I might ask the students for a word. What word would best fit here? Or is this sentence in proper order, or should we rearrange our paragraph? So we involve the students. Step 3 is scaffolding the strategy we're using. And this is now the students are doing and the teacher's helping. If it was a one-on-one situation, I as a teacher would sit down and let the student do it, and I'd be right there helping the student. But because we're in classes, I can't help every single student on a one-to-one basis. I provide them support by putting them in groups. Now they have each other for support. They can scaffold and offer support to each other. So I put them in a group of 4 or 5 or 2 or 3. And I say, okay, now you guys try reading this paragraph and making a connection. Well, the students are asked to make a text-to-text, text-to-self, and text-to-world connection. I might be little Billy and I can make a really good text-to-world connection, but I'm struggling with making a text-to-text connection. Well, someone in my group can demonstrate that skill and support me, and we do it together as a group. If we're writing, then maybe the group would write a descriptive paragraph, and they'd each have their input into what would be the best word choice, sentence structure, things like that. And then number 4 is independent use. Now the students are doing it and the teacher watches. I'm there for help, but now the students are trying it independently. So I'm going to read and make connections on my own. I can make a text-to-self connection to this reading passage on my own without the support of teacher and students. I'm demonstrating that I'm starting to master this skill and I'm using it independently. The teacher could also give the writing assignment individually. Each student writes a descriptive paragraph. All 4 steps, modeling, apprenticeship, scaffolding, independent use, these are all the practice stages. Students aren't ready to be tested. You're not at any point going to assess a student and put this in your mark book for these steps. This is the practice session. When I get there and show that I can do it independently, then you can put me in a situation where now you can assess me and put it in your mark book. So you apply this to another graph, and this comes from Principles of Effective Literacy Instruction. You look at the learning in the zone of proximal development. So we have the ZAD, the ZPD, and the ZAD. In the zone of actual development, this is what the student already knows and can do. New learning is not occurring in this zone. And it's important to assess students before teaching to determine their knowledge and skills. Because remember we said we don't want to set them up for failure by making the new zone of actual development too far away. If you think of video games are beautifully structured in that level 1 it's really easy to do, and students say, oh, I can do that. Then you get level 2 and it's a little bit harder, but because I did level 1 I can do it. And then level 3 is a little bit harder. If I started at level 100 I would bomb out and probably shut the game off and never try. But video games very gradually build students up using the gradual release to students or teachers or whoever's playing the game. So it gets harder and harder, but I don't feel it because I'm mastering each little step. And that's the same with the zone of proximal development. I have to create each little step so that students can feel success as they're working through and reaching for that higher zone of operation. So here's another diagram, and this is what teaching is, right? I read aloud or I model writing. I share reading, I share the writing where they and I talk together. The guided reading, guided writing, independent reading, independent writing. When I'm modeling, this is high levels teacher support. I'm at the front, I've got the pen, I've got the paper, I'm doing the thinking, I'm doing the talking. When they're independent now, students are now operating individually. They're operating by themselves. They're showing mastery of the new skill. So here's a question. We've talked a lot about secondary teachers and teaching literacy. Do you think teachers are adverse to teaching literacy, or is there another answer to that question? So let's have a think, pair, share. I'm going to give you 5 minutes for this activity. Think to yourself about how you'd answer this, and then pair with a partner, and then we'll share it with a larger group. Okay, we're back. Great discussion. Now let's move on to connecting the tools and the skills. Let's talk about one of the skills. Let's talk about specifically inferencing. So I ask a question. Is making an inference educated guessing? Well, let's talk about it. An inference is the ability to connect what is in the text with what is in the mind to create an educated guess. That comes from Beer. The inference is drawing conclusions based on observation. So read the following situation and infer what is happening. So here's the situation. A young man brings a bouquet of flowers to the home of a girl who goes to his school. What do we infer? What's happening here? We're not given the whole story. We have to infer. So I'm going to infer that maybe he likes the girl and maybe he's going to ask her out on a date. Okay? So how do I make that inference? What's my educated guess? Well, my guess is a bouquet of flowers is a sign of affection. It's not a sign of I hate you, they're not breaking up. It's not usually something you do for someone who's just a friend. There's usually a romance involved. So flowers are my text base. That's my what I'm building my inference on. I know that the bouquet of flowers has special meaning, and because it's a boy and girl and they know each other previously from school, that I can infer that he's asking her out on a date or there's a romance between them. Let's give you guys time to practice. Here's 3 more situations. want you to try these with a partner. So situation number 1, your neighbor, married about a year ago, is shopping for diapers and baby formula. What do you infer? Number 3, a car containing 2 men has been parked in front of your neighbor's home every day for a week. Based on that text, what can you infer? And number 4, a car stops at a gas station in the middle of the night and a woman rushes in asking to use the telephone. So I'll give you about 3-4 minutes. Try these with a partner and see what you can infer from this situation. Okay, that was interesting. Got a lot of different ideas there, but a lot of you were quite aligned in your thinking. Let's talk more about inferencing. Here's a quote I found, and I just pulled it in. Inference: logical, justifiable, you're able to make a case. It's not a guess, right? We call it an educated guess, but it's not really, it's guessing a little bit, but if it's logical and justifiable, maybe you're not guessing. And here's what you do. You combine clues and with your experience, and you make a logical conclusion. The combining of clues, the clues come from your content. That's your text. You have to teach students how to go through their text. And they have to draw from experience. That's their schema. That's their background. What knowledge do I have? And then they have to make an inference, which is a logical conclusion. And this is what you can practice with students. You look at the content from your experience. What can you make? How can you make connections between the content and your own experience to make a conclusion, to make an inference? And that's where we traditionally maybe had tried students to practice inferencing skills in our science textbook, in geography textbook, and using Shakespeare. But if we really want them to practice this and really want them to think about this, that's where we need to engage in new technologies. Twitter is great. People are only allowed to use 140 characters. There's a lot of inferencing has to occur based on what people can only say in 140 characters. Pull up Twitter pages, get students to look at their Twitter accounts and get them to realize that they're actually doing a lot of inferring when they look at the short messages they get from friends and from people and think about it. Here's a graphic organizer you can use with students. They write down text clues and what they think, which is they're drawing from experiences, and what they infer, what kind of conclusions they can use. And this works in every subject area. You have to infer when you read geography, you have to infer when you read math, you have to infer when you read English. And here's some prompts. If you look at these, you can use these in a variety of situations. The clues are telling me that. When I see this, it makes me think that. I am noticing. So you can use these clues and get students thinking in groups or individually. They can do them in pairs. So what I'm going to ask you to do is think about how these strategies can be applied using digital technology. When can you ask students to pull in some of their text that they read? Like go home and bring in your screenshot of your favorite website and then say, okay, this makes me conclude that, and have them practicing their inferencing skills. If you put it in the forefront of their thinking, it becomes really upfront and part of their thinking, then they're going to be more confident, more explicit about using these skills. Okay, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes for a think, pair, share. Think about how can you use these strategies, share with a partner, and then share with the large. Okay, good discussion. Now I want to bring something up that I heard Damien Cooper talking about. He was talking about how thinking is what makes learning happen. If you aren't thinking, you're not going to learn. And so that's why I think pair, share works so well, right? If I could say, take the first one. The clues are telling me that, and say, ask for a show of hands, or someone put up your hand and tell me how you could use this in your subject area or with social media. And someone could put up their hand and answer that question. Well, as soon as that person puts up their hand and answers the question, everyone else in the room doesn't have to think anymore. Someone's done all the thinking for them, right? Damien Cooper would say, use a no hands policy. He says use a think, pair, share. Because when I ask you to think, then everyone's thinking now, because they know they have to turn to a partner and account for the thinking. And so now everyone's learning and everyone's sharing. So getting students to always think, always get them thinking about what's going on is key and very important for learning to occur. Okay, let's look at this poem. Visualizing helps inference skills. If you think about it, when we have to visualize something, we're taking the information in the text, but a vision is so much more than the words, right? There's 1,000 pictures worth 1,000 words. Well, if I have one word in front of me and I'm trying to visualize, I have to infer all the other 1,999 words that are missing. So if we look at the poem Fog, the fog comes on little cat feet. It sits looking over the harbor and city on silent haunches and then moves on. If I try and visualize that, I could ask students to sketch, draw, create a diagram after reading a passage. Well, the act of visualizing helps with your inference skills. So if you could use that in your subject areas or with students and use digital media, having to visualize what they're reading, that's working on their inference skills. Because you want their visualization to be accurate. It has to be tied to the text. They can't be visualizing something totally irrelevant, right? If it says fog comes on little cat feet, well, I can't envision a rainstorm, snowstorm, or a hot sunny day. I have to envision what is based in the text, and that's building inference skills. But there's challenges, okay? Number one is students sometimes tend to ignore the information. Like I said, they guess, they jump to conclusions, they ignore the author's signals. If we go back to fog, right? If I guessed it was a snowstorm, then I'm ignoring the information. The author gave me a signal. This is a foggy day. The cat's being compared to fog, not to snow, not to rain, not to sun. So I have to teach students and give them practice opportunities and give them feedback showing that they're basing their inferences on the text in front of them. And another challenge is their schema. Background knowledge is incomplete. And this is probably a big challenge for a lot of teachers, is in specialized subject areas, they haven't got that schema, that they lack the background knowledge to make an inference, right? If we go back to these situations here, right? A young man brings a bouquet of flowers. If I had no idea why someone would bring a bouquet of flowers, or I had no idea what a bouquet was, then I would have a lot of trouble inferring what's going on. And these other situations, right? Diapers and baby formula. If I knew nothing about where babies came from, then I would have trouble making an inference. So it means building inference skills means the students need the schema, the background knowledge in order to make those kind of connections. Their schema could be fragmented. Their schema could be inaccurate. It could be based on myths and rumors and stories they've heard from friends. So a teacher's job, if you want to have a successful inference skills in your book, with your text in class, they need to have the background knowledge. And so it requires you to do a lot of teaching to build up the background knowledge so that they can then read and make the inferences. That's why if you want them to practice, then go into their world, their digital world. They're reading messages from Facebook on friends and Twitters. They're looking at pictures on Flickr. Quite often that's driven by interest. That's where their schema is. So if you when we said volumes and volumes of practice will make them better readers, encourage practice in areas where they have the schema, and then gradually introduce more knowledge so that they have the schema to make inferencing. I was remarking at a workshop once with some other teachers about, as we get older, we naturally become better at making inferences because our schema, our background knowledge is so much richer than it is when we were younger. Okay, let's look at another skill. Let's look at making connections. And making connections, we quite often talk about making connections to self, to text, and to world. This is all about readers bring their own experiences of background knowledge to a text, and they make personal connections. I connect one text to another. This reminds me of something I've read before. Or I make connections to the world. Oh, this reminds me of something I heard on the news. Or I make a personal connection. Oh, this happened to me before. Right? So we make connections to a text. And why is that good? Well, Subir says, to promote better engagement with the text, students need to make connections. Students should bring their own background knowledge of a topic and their various experience to the reading process. Doing so can lead students to generate questions that they would like to have answered by their reading. So they're engaging with the text now. Their learning becomes richer. They get a higher level of comprehension and experience with the text when they make connections. These connections enrich the text and help the reader to understand text at a higher and deeper level of meaning. And the basic three are text to self, text to text, text to world. So let's look at our poem on fog again. And I'm asking you, make a text to text, text to self, and text to world connection to the reading. Let's just do an impromptu think, pair, share here. Try doing it on your own and then meet with a partner. Maybe you're having trouble making a text to text connection. Maybe a partner can help you. So we'll do a think, pair, share. You try making those three connections on your own, then do it with a partner, and then do it with a... Okay, well done. That was good exercise. So, How can I use what I already know to help me understand this text? Here's some prompts you can use with students. If you don't want to say text, make a text to world connection or make a text to self connection, ask these questions. I already know about something about this topic, or this text reminds me of, or this compares to. This text is different from because this section made me think about. Let's now focus our discussion around social media. How can you use these questions with social media to get students engaging? How can you train them? I remember when I was first really explicitly exploring making text-to-text connections, and then all of a sudden it was everywhere for me. I was reading about it, and I got home, my son was doing lit circles, and he was the connector for that day, and so I saw it there. And then I started to really, it became part of my thinking then. I was reading that night, and I was saying, I made a text-to-text connection, and then I actually stopped and paused and said, I just made a connection, a text-to-text connection. Proficient readers, you do that naturally. You say, oh, I've read something by this author before, I'm quite familiar with it. Oh, this reminds me of something I heard in the news. You make those connections. Non-proficient readers aren't so good, and that's where we need to practice and make it explicit for them. And this is what gradual release teaching would be. You would read a passage of text to students and you would make connections for them. You would actually pause your reading and say, I'm in my mind making a connection right now. And then you read a little bit further and say, hey, this relates to something else. And so you kind of read and then stop and think aloud for them. And then you try it with the shared instruction, have students do it with you, and then have them try it in groups. But anyway, let's address our question. How can you use these questions with social media? Think, pair, share. Good work. Okay. Now, let's look a little bit more closely at these. When we're trying to make a text-to-self connection, we're asking questions like, have you encountered similar settings? Do the characters remind you of yourself or someone you know? Have you experienced similar experiences or conflicts? Give your students these questions to take home and try out in their social media settings. When you want to make text-to-text connections, the text, how does it relate to other texts you've read? Have you read or viewed another text about the same topic or a similar topic? Do you see similar settings, conflicts, or characters? Does the text remind you of another you've read in a similar theme? Have you read a text by the same author? And then the text to world connections. Does the text relate to any current events? Does the text relate to past or present events? And do you see a connection to ideas or issues? Okay, looking back now. So literacy skills plus technology equals engagement by our weaker students, the ones that need the practice and skill development. You've got those students in your class that will read anything you hand them. They've got that reading skill at a high level because they practice all the time. They'll read anything. But we have to, if you remember the changing mission, it's not about, oh, well, some students will read well and some won't, and a lot of students will be in the middle. It's about getting all our students to succeed. We have to identify who our weak readers are and go after them. We have to give them the tools, the explicit teaching they need to be successful readers. And by looking at making connections and inferencing, we're just looking at the skills that they'll need. There are many others. We can talk to them about how to preview a text, how to be metacognitive about your reading skills, monitor yourself. When do I need to speed up and when do I slow down? So this is just a tip of an iceberg. So here's how I'm going to end today. No matter what instructional methods we employ, students must spend substantial time applying the reading skills and strategies we teach before they develop reading proficiency. Why not use texts they want to engage with in order to get them to practice these skills? So we're going to wrap up today. I have a ticket out the door for you just to get some feedback, and I want to spend some time looking at this question. I'm going to ask you to just meet with the groups you've been meeting and saying, how can I access reading skills, literacy skills, writing skills by using social media, and how does it fit my classroom? Can I have students tweeting about a topic we're discussing in class? Can I have students creating Facebook profiles of a scientist, of a person from history, of a character from our literature? Can I have students creating a Flickr account and put on the Flickr account for photographs, putting their tableaus, acting out a scene? Can I use YouTube as an instructional tool? Can I bring these tools into my classroom so that students will engage and practice and use these tools? Thank you everyone for coming today. It was a great session.